A while back, I read this article about artist Hilary Walters Faley and her leaf embroidery, and I thought this sounds like it could have many millinery and costuming applications. Hello and welcome to an autumnal millinery hat making video. My name is Ilona, I'm a milliner based in London, and today I'm going to be trying my hand at preserving real leaves. I think this technique has a wide range of uses, such as wreath making, cosplay and millinery hat making. Let's grab our coats, scarves and hats and head outside to gather some leaves. I've not yet seen the type of tree that I'm looking for. I was hoping for a classic, like a maple leaf shape, but obviously no maple trees here. All there is in this particular park in London seem to be oak trees, which is more summery than autumnal, I think. There's several different things that I want to test out with the glycerin. One of those is it possible to preserve the colour? So I'm trying to pick some orange leaves alongside some greener leaves to see if the colour stays, although I have a feeling that it will probably just turn brown anyway. Brown is fine, brown is pretty. There's some rosehip berries over here, which I wonder if the glycerin will preserve those too. We can give it a go. Aha! It's this one. Yes. I don't know what this is called. Oh, it doesn't look the healthiest. And it's not yet gone brown. We'll have to see what happens. Oh, there's a smaller one right here. And it started yellowing slightly, so we've got some interesting colour variation. Look at that. Isn't that so pretty? This being the UK in October, it is now, I believe the technical term is pissing it down. We found some cover over here and I'm going to quickly pick off all of these yellow and brown leaves off the ground, and then we're going to run home and potentially we're going to have to resume this tomorrow. I tell people not to wear my hats in the rain and I'm clearly not good at following my own advice. I'm just going to grab all the leaves I can and we're going to run. I want to approach this using a scientific method. The way I see it, this experiment has 3 stages: preservation, drying, and usage. Within these stages, I have many different aspects of the processes that I want to test. I have created a little table of them right here. With all that laid out, let's start with the preservation. Apart from the freshly picked and washed leaves, I will be using glycerin and food colouring. I think the leaves might lose their saturated colours, so I figured that maybe, just like roses, if I add food colouring to the glycerin water, it might boost their vibrancy. As usual, Drusilla is here to help out. Her leaf sorting skills are apparently the best in the world. Let's first sort through all the leaves. I'm going to group them all by colour. So I will end up with summery green leaves, yellow leaves, light brown leaves, and really dark brown leaves. Next, prepare the glycerin. I will be using a ratio of 1 part glycerin to 2 parts warm water. So for my bottle of 200 milliliters of glycerin, I will use 400 milliliters of warm tap water. Give that a good stir. The solution will go a little bit cloudy. Before putting the leaves into the glycerin solution, the stems need to be cut off at an angle, just like for flower arranging. Stems have a miraculous ability to heal once they are cut in as little as 1 minute. If the stem heals, it will not be able to soak up water efficiently. So once the leaf stems are cut, race against the clock and get them into that glycerin solution as soon as you can. To top the leaves, I will need a heavy weight to make sure that they are all submerged. I'm using a bowl. And now, my first problem. It turns out that for the amount of leaves that I have gathered, I am going to need a whole lot more glycerin. I guess I'll have to panic buy a whole litre from Amazon Prime.
The next day.
My panic bought glycerin has arrived. Let's open up the package and make sure it's the right thing. Wonderful. For the 1 litre of glycerin, I will need 2 litres of warm tap water. Now, the good news here is that I don't have to worry about food safety, as glycerin and food colouring are by their nature food safe. So I'm mixing all this up in a drinks pitcher. And then I'm going to do the same thing as I did yesterday and cut the stems. I'm going to keep all my leaf colour groups separate, so here I am starting by submerging all the dark brown ones. Next, I'm going to try the yellow food colouring on some of the yellow leaves. I am hoping the extra colouring will brighten up the natural yellow in the leaves. At this point, I would love to know what you all think will happen to these leaves as they sit in the glycerin. Leave your predictions in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more experimental millinery content. Then, the green leaves I'm going to leave plain without any extra colouring. And then some red. It will be interesting to see if the red colouring completely changes the colour of the leaves, or it might mix with the natural yellowness of the leaves and give them a slight orange tint. Let's not forget about our rosehip berries. I don't think this will work at all, but we won't know until I try it. Lastly, the orange. Just like with the red, I'm interested if it will override the natural leaf colour or just gently nudge it towards a warm orange tone. I have weighed down all the leaves with plates and containers to make sure they are submerged. They will now live in my spare shower for the next 5 days.
4 to 6 days later.
Oh goodness, I was not expecting that. Look at how dark that water has gone. These were the natural yellow leaves without any extra food colouring. And I am now slightly worried that they are going to be a mess and an ugly colour. But actually, once they are out of those murky waters, they look just fine. However, we won't know the final outcomes of the colour preservation until they are fully dry. Let's have a look at how the leaves in the orange food colouring fared. They look pretty good, but I don't think they've taken on any colour. And it's the same with the leaves in the red colouring. The next step is to dry them all, so keeping all the leaves in their colour groups, I am first going to gently press the water out of them between some cotton cloths. The glycerin residue felt very slippery, and after this step my hands felt very soft indeed. No need to use hand cream this evening before bed. For the drying, let's fill up my proper leaf press first. I'm going to place in a sheet of paper, followed by a napkin and then some leaves. Then the napkin again, and a piece of paper again, And I will keep building up those layers until the press is fully occupied. As I have run out of space in the leaf press, I'm going to try the traditional book pressing method. I am sandwiching leaves between napkins and sliding them into the pages of a heavy book. In my case, this is The Anatomy of Colour, the story of heritage paints and pigments by Patrick Beattie. If you are interested in paint pigment history and development, this book is for you. It's very good. Just for some variation in drying methods, I am going to pin a few leaves up onto my corkboard. I don't think they will do particularly well, and they will probably all curl up. I'm curious to see what will happen. Another hanging drying method. I have hung some strings up against my corridor wall, and I will use mini clothes pegs to attach the leaves to it. Almost like I am drying socks. And of course, my assistant is here to help. With the remaining leaves, I'm going to place them inside the napkins. Then I'm going to place them under some heavy weights. And what can be heavier than a solid wood vintage mid-century hat block?
4 to 6 days later.
After waiting just under a week for the leaves to dry, it's time to see how they've turned out. These were mostly the colourless leaves. They feel almost leathery. They have left a little bit of colour residue on the tissue, so now I'm a little bit worried that the ones in the books might have stained the book pages. Whoops. They definitely don't feel dry and shriveled. What I should have done was pressed a control experimental leaf that I didn't put any glycerin into, but I forgot to do that. But I'm sure you all know that if you just press straight up dried flowers, they are crunchy and crispy, and this is really, really supple. Here are some food colouring marks. Never mind. I guess don't press the leaves in a book. I do like how some of the discoloration in the leaves has been preserved, so they definitely still look very, very real. Next up, I've got the leaves that dried in the pile of tissues. I'm starting to think it doesn't really make a difference in how you dry them if you're going to press them. And let's have a look at various colours. So this is the selection of yellows, oranges. I don't actually think that the food colouring has done anything at all. Absolutely nothing. I can't really tell them apart. I think we can safely say the colours are preservable. They don't look like the brown sludge you see on the roads. Oh well, so there you have it. Food colouring makes no difference. These green ones have been drying flat on a tea towel. They are pretty much the same as the ones dried in the tissues and the ones dried in the leaf press. That's worked out pretty well. Oh, and I forgot to mention with these ones that dried flat, the green is very clearly preserved. The berries, however, have not worked well at all, and actually some of the leaves from the berries have completely fallen off the stem. They are slightly on the crispy crunchy side, and the berries have all shriveled up. I think we can safely say that preserving berries using glycerin, it's not going to work. What about the ones that were dried on the wall? Well, I think they've seen better days. I think this is the least successful method. As I was taking them off, some of them had ripped. They've also shriveled up pretty much the most compared to all the other drying methods we've looked at so far. The last ones I've got to look at are the ones I pinned to the wall. It seems that the darker the leaf, the more it has shriveled up. The green ones from the wall and from the pin board have stayed quite flat. So again, Not the greatest method. I wouldn't recommend pinning them to a cork wall. We have reached the usage part of the experiment. I want to see how the glycerin leaves react with some decorative techniques. Here is the leaf that I tried to use the flower tools on, and as you saw in the footage, I pressed too hard and it cracked. Now I wonder if this could be remedied if you stiffened the leaf first with some Millinery PVA water-based stiffener or even some chemical stiffener, just like you would if you were making silk velvet flowers. I would say that if you wanted to have your leaf 3D, then maybe don't dry it flat, hang it up to dry, and it might kind of cup around and keep that 3D shape. Next up, the embroidery. Now, I will be the first to admit that I am not the best embroiderer in the world. The most interesting pattern I could think of was very messy X's up the center stem. Once again, I think this would have worked better on a pre-stiffened leaf. Now, the difference between stitching through a leaf and stitching through fabric is that once you poke your needle through, that's it. That hole is in the leaf forever. I guess just like it is with leather. So again, it feels like leather, it pretty much acts like leather, except for not responding well to heat. Next up, more stitching examples, this time with the wire. My thinking behind this was that when you make flowers out of silk, they generally have a wire running through them and you can bend them into many interesting shapes. Now obviously on my version you can very clearly see the wire, but I think if you dyed the wire using some silk paint or just an alcohol marker, that would probably solve that. And I think you can get some very interesting squiggly shapes with the leaves. The acrylic paint. The red patch on the leaf here, I just wanted to see what would happen if I covered the entire leaf in paint, because I was slightly worried that it would crack up a little bit, but it hasn't. It's stayed with being flexible, which I think is very interesting, because normally if you just put some acrylic paint onto some fabric without any kind of textile medium mixed into the paint, it does crackle and start to peel off. But then again, this is a technique that's used in a lot of vintage straw hats. When designs are just painted straight onto the straw, it can actually look really pretty. And I think if you painted something pretty on the leaf, not just a big patch of red, I think that would work and look pretty nice. One thing I will definitely note is that the lighter colours are better in the acrylic, but then darker colours are better in the silk dyes. And I think there's something quite whimsical and magical about adding a little extra design to the leaf, because it takes the leaf out of being a normal earthy leaf and maybe it turns it into a new species that's found on a different fantasy planet. And next, the glue gun leaves. The point of this was to see if they would hold together well with heat, because I was slightly worried that the glycerin would make them too slippery to adhere to each other, but no, they're absolutely fine. Oh, they do rip if I start to... You see, look, I've made a hole in there already. So they do rip and they are delicate, but they do hold. So if you were making a wreath, glue gun is probably a good way to go. The other thing I thought about with using glue guns is you could end up with a hat like this. This is a hat covered in feathers, also using a glue gun. Why not do cascading leaves in the same kind of pattern? That's an interesting thing to try. But how about those leaves that I stiffened earlier? These, I think, have turned out the best. Here is the leaf stiffened with the white PVA school glue solution, and here is the leaf stiffened with the polyvinyl alcohol solution. They are pretty much identical. Anything you've got, just use that. So wood glue, school glue, white PVA in a ratio of 1 glue to water works really, really well. One thing I will say is it has lost the nice leather texture though, so that's something to keep in mind. These two in the middle, I stiffened with the chemical Extra 36 stiffener, and these are the ones I like best. The stiffener has given the leaves a very subtle shine, and it brings out all of the detail in the veining of the leaf. It catches the light in such a pretty way. And if you didn't want it to have that shine, here is one that I stiffened just on the back. And sometimes the simplest things are just the best. Here is a leaf that I sprayed with clear gloss lacquer. It's pretty much identical to the PVA solution. I don't think you could really tell these apart if you were looking at them too closely. And then what about the spray paint? Here is a leaf that was spray painted gold. How pretty does that look? I think this has been the most effective experiment. It's simple, quick, and visually absolutely stunning. And I pretty much feel similar about the black one. It's very gothic, very noir, very appropriate for Halloween. I really like how the paint has gone on and how it's adhered. This is just normal gold spray paint, and this is the fabric spray paint, and I do think the fabric spray paint has left the leaf with a little bit extra flexibility that is not quite there from the normal spray paint. So if you can get yourself some fabric spray paint, then that's probably the best thing to use. To summarize, if I was to do this again, I would preserve the leaves plain without any food coloring. Dry them in a flower press or in tissues with heavy weights on top. Then finish them off with a 1 to 2 school or wood glue PVA to water solution, or use the chemical Millinery stiffener Extra 36 to give them a lovely shine and retain their flexibility. So now we've got all these leaves and all these techniques, where can we apply them? Of course, my mind went straight to millinery. As the leaves feel like leather, you could use them in a similar way as you would use leather to cover a hat. Stitch the leaves down onto a pillbox or button shape, gently smoothing them over the curved edges. I am actually really intrigued by this idea, and I'm thinking of turning this into a workshop in time for autumn 2023. So if you are interested in that, please let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any future announcements. Other millinery and fantasy costuming applications could be making a fairy queen crown, perhaps using a wire structure as the support. Or if you are into cosplay, how about applying this to a poison ivy costume, but obviously please don't use actual poison ivy. Perhaps you are a normal person and you're going to a harvest festival. You can put these preserved leaves into a festive wreath to wear or to decorate your house with. If you want to be more subtle, I think you could make a brooch pin or even a hat pin. And there you have it. I hope you have enjoyed all my experiments. Thank you so much for watching, liking, and subscribing. See you next time. Bye.